Well, we have the pleasure of introducing today Doug Kirk, who is known, if not personally in our community, at least by his fruits. He has been the publisher for the last 15 years of the Canyon Lake Week and the Bulverde Standard. So I think just about everybody has seen and or read those publications over the years. He has a lot of other credentials that I hadn't been aware of, but shouldn't be surprised about. I knew you were a psychologist, but of course you have a master's degree in psychology, plus the lesser degrees that support that. You've sold a screenplay. That's fantastic. That's pretty neat. We've talked about screenwriting in this group a couple of times, so that might be something that during the question and answer period, anyone who's interested in that can certainly follow up on. Amongst other things, Doug has co-written 3 law books. He's been an animal trainer for motion pictures and commercials. He's published hundreds of articles and hundreds of photographs in almost 36 nationally distributed magazines. He's won 108 journalism and photography awards, including the Texas Photo Journalist of the Year Award twice, 2 times. That's amazing. So this is certainly a man who has exemplified a lot of the things that many of us are striving for in this group. So I think we're going to have an interesting talk, and then of course we'll be able to follow up and ask anything we like during a question and answer period. So Doug Kirk, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. Let me see, they said how to turn this on. I don't know if we need it. Does anybody know the secret?
Yes.
There you go.
Is that any better?
Yeah.
Because
put it a little closer to your mouth.
little close. Well,
Yeah,
I'll tend to talk a little loud too. Earlier I got here a little earlier and was getting set up, and Mike came into the restroom and he said, "Doug, what are you doing here? It doesn't start till 6 o'clock." And I said, "Well, I'm just getting ready." And he said, "Do you get nervous when you talk to people?" And I said, "No, not really. I used to years ago, but I've talked to so many groups I don't get nervous anymore." And he says, "Well, why are you standing in the women's restroom?" Just kidding. Maybe he gets a little nervous too. Well, what I want to do is talk a little bit about fiction to start with. And before I do that, how many of you have written fiction? Can I see a show of hands? So about half of you have written fiction, and how many of you published fiction? 5,000 books. That's pretty spectacular. I want to talk about how I write fiction, and those of you that write fiction already probably do this in a similar manner. Those who have not written fiction, these tips really work for me, so they might work for you as well. And there's 10 tips, 10 things. See if I can remember them all. The first thing that you want to do when you get ready to write fiction is know the outcome of the story before you write it. Know the ending before you get started. That is so important. There's so many people who'll sit down and they have a great idea for a scene or a great character, and they get to writing and it's a great opening chapter and it dies. They don't know where they're going, and you can't get there if you don't know where you're going. So you always need to know the ending of the book before you start, at least an idea of what the ending is going to be. That's tip number 1. Number 2, start with a really, really good premise. One of the things that makes stories fall flat is that you've heard it before. You've read it before, you've seen it on TV before, you've watched it at the motion picture theater before. The same old story is boring because you can anticipate the answers to all the dilemmas, and you know where it's going, and you're not going to be interested. So come up with a premise that is unique, a new twist, some new way of seeing the world. And as writers, that's what we do. I mean, we're all strange people. It is so good to be among my own kind. To hear that somebody gets up earlier or later than 7 a.m., that's refreshing. It's nice to know that somebody sleeps in. I tend to do that because I work late at night when it's quiet, and I don't want to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning. And now I know there's some writers, you like to get up, 5 a.m. and you're out there typing. It's like, oh no, I just went to bed, So tip number 2 is come up with a really great premise. Number 3, let me see if I can remember what number 3 is. If I can't, I'll pull it out of my pocket. Gotta pull it out of my pocket. Okay. Number 3, when you get ready to write the story, be sure and think it through. A leads to B, B leads to C, C leads to D. If you don't think about it, then you're going to get into the story and you're going to wander. You're not going to have a direction. So think it through. That's number 3. And number 4, what you want to do is diagram your story. To me, and some people say an outline, what I do is I draw little boxes. And I put the name of the character and what he does, and I draw an arrow to this character and what he does, and another box and this character and what he does, and then this goes back and impacts this thing. That's how I do it. Now, either you do it mentally or you do it on a piece of paper. But you should diagram it. What leads to what? That way, when you're writing the story, not only do you know where you're going, but you know these little side plots and you know these things. I need to mention this because later on I'm going to need this over here. So be sure to do that. Number 5, get to know your characters. Now, that seems simple enough. You think you know your characters, but do you really? How tall are they? What color are their eyes? What do they like to eat? What's their education? What do they talk like? If you don't know these characters, how can you possibly represent them in your book? And one of the ways to do that, and this sounds funny, but you go down to somebody that's got job applications and you pick up a big stack of job applications and you fill them out for each one of your characters. And the job application is going to ask all those relevant questions that you need to answer in your own mind. So that's, to me, that's really good, a good approach, is know your characters through their job application. Number 6, this comes from being a photographer. In your story, you need to know the defining moment in the life of these characters. Now, if you're taking a picture of a guy playing basketball, and he's dribbling the ball, and he jumps up, and he puts that ball right up into the hoop, that's the defining moment in that action. The fact that he's just making it. As a photographer, you want to take a picture of that, because there he is, he's getting it in. And that's the kind of picture that goes on the front page of the newspaper. With your characters, you don't want to talk about something in their life that doesn't matter. It's boring. Nobody wants to hear that a guy got up in the morning, he went to work, he did his regular work, he came home, he watched television, he went to bed, and the next day he did the same thing. I mean, that could be the beginning of a story. But what you want to know is what happened that day that changed his life, the defining moment that made him go from being this person to this person. A completely weird event that happened to him or something. That's the defining moment. And you have to know that, because if you don't, the story will die. It just won't go anywhere. One of the tips that I tell people all the time is you should write every single day. Practice makes perfect. Writing is one of those things that if you do it constantly, then it becomes a tool. It's no longer a struggle. I look at kids that are assigned themes to do for their English teachers. They struggle, how hard, how difficult it is. What I tell my kids is, well, just discuss the topic. Talk about it. Express it in words. And then sit down and write it. Because that's all writing is it's the written word. And if you can talk about it, if you can express it in that manner, then it's very, very easy. If you get used to doing that on a regular basis, each and every day, then writing is no longer, it's not a stumbling block. It's now a tool. It's something that you know how to do, and as a writer, you have to be able to write. And once you've learned that that's just the mechanics, now you can concentrate on characters and plot and the story and the defining moment and things like that. Another thing you should do, another tip that I think is really important, is you need to listen to people around you. Your dialogue comes from the people around you. And I don't know, I personally think the older you are, the better suited you are to write fiction, because you've heard so many people during the course of your life, the experience that you've taken in. you turn around and output that in the form of words on a page, and the dialogue is real. Now, one way to do that is tape record what people say and listen to the recording. So after the emotion of the discussion is gone, now you can listen to the words. And if you really want to get good, transcribe some of those discussions. And you'll find out that people don't talk the way that we write that they say. The verbal word, the spoken word, is vastly different than what we type on a page. If you want your book to be realistic, it needs to be a better reflection of how people actually talk. That's good dialogue. Another tip, your characters have to have personality. That gets a little bit back to the job application, but by personality, I want to know, how are they going to react to something? You know, is this guy a hothead? Is he going to blow up? Is he going to be out of control? Or is he going to be the kind of guy that when the defining moment hits him, he withdraws, he panics? What is this guy like psychologically? What's his personality? What is he likely to say and do given a situation hitting him? And if you want your characters to be real, they have to have a deep personality. And one of the problems with a lot of books is you get into it and the character's introduced and he talks a while and the reader doesn't care about him. You're not going to care about a guy that has no personality. You want to care. Like I've got some situations in my books that we'll talk about later where a guy is about to be burned at the stake. And I hope that the reader looks at that and says, no, not that. Because at that point in the story, I want people to really like the guy and say, that can't happen. So make sure they have personality. And then finally, the 10th tip that I would offer you is make sure that you write about something that you know. Do not write about a subject you have no information about. And if you don't know it, research it. If you're going to write a story about horse racing, it's beneficial if you've been to a horse race. It's beneficial if you've raced horses. It's beneficial if you've talked to people that have raced horses. If you don't know anything about horse racing and you start writing a story about it, it's like, what are you thinking? Because you don't know the terminology, you don't know how people feel, you don't know what the jockeys say, you don't know what the owners say, you don't know the kinds of things, the emotions that they go through. So don't write about something that you don't understand. Write about those subjects that you know. Now, if you want to write about something that you've never done, then what you should do is research. In my first book that we'll talk about later, there's a scene in the 1650s in an immigration ship coming from Ireland to the United States. Well, now, obviously, I've never been on an immigration ship. I don't know, and we'll get into this pretty quickly, but I don't know for sure how I wrote what I wrote. And as I talk to people that have studied history, there's one guy in particular in Bulverde that's a historian, and he read these things and he says, Doug, did you study history in college? Well, you know, other than, you know, the typical history courses, the answer is no. He said, your battle scenes are correct, everything you've got in there historically is correct. And you know, I guess I got lucky, I'm not sure, but the bottom line is that you need to write about things that you know. So those are the 10 tips that I would offer you as a writer. And just to review, know the ending before you start. Have a premise that is unique or different. Be sure and think through the story. A leads to B, B leads to C. Diagram your plot. Write it down. Get it on paper. Know your characters. Come up with a defining moment in the lives of those characters. Write every day. Listen for dialogue. It's all around you. Make sure your characters have personality and write what you know. And this is my notes for that. Can everybody see my notes?
All right.
These are my notes. That's another story, we'll talk about it another time, is
how you can reduce something you want to say to some pictures that you put on a note card. Now, what I really want to talk about are the books that I just wrote. And it's been a really interesting experience. I wrote this first book in 20 hours. Now, that's not 20 straight hours, but I logged, when I sat down at the computer, I logged how long it took, and it was 20 hours. And when I wrote this, I thought, okay, the book's done. Story, the premise is done, the characters are done. But unfortunately, I guess I didn't believe myself, because I wrote this book, which took about the same amount of time, I think a little bit more. And I said, all right, I'm finished. Books are done. So, and this one, by the way, was February. I'm not a basketball player. February of last year is when I did this. And I wrote this one in July of last year. And then I wrote this one in August of last year. And then I wrote this one in January of this year. And it's been a really weird experience, because I think what happened is the premise was so engaging that I could not let it go. I just couldn't walk away. The characters became real to me, and I don't know how to explain that. I mean, those of you that write fiction, you know your characters, they get to have a personality, and you start to care about them. And these people got so real to me that they just kept talking to me. They kept saying, oh, well, we can do this and this. And everybody that knows me, when I was doing this, they kept asking, are there going to be more? I said, no, it's done. The story's done. So now they're saying, well, is book 5 coming? The answer is no, it's not. But I don't know. Yeah. Okay, let me explain this. This is called Look for Me. Look for Me. And this is the Look for Me, I Will Find You series. And what these books do is they trace the lives of a couple, lovers, that started in the year 1014 and continue through the books until the year 2040. And I don't know if you've guessed at this point, but it's a story about reincarnation. And the original couple, the girl has a dream about the guy. They're not married, but they're intended, and she feels that he's going to die in a battle that's going to take place the next day. And so she says, please don't go to the battle. And this is the Battle of Clontarf in Ireland, where about 10,000 people were hacked to death in one day. That's where the Irish were trying to push the Vikings off the island to end a 200-year reign where the Irish were suppressed by the Vikings. And so this young boy he was a farmer, and he was going to war like everybody else, and the girl said, don't go, you're not going to survive. At the end of the discussion the night before, he said, well, if anything happens to me, look for me. I will find you. And that is the premise of the book, that these couples are so in love and the souls are so interlinked that no matter what happens from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime, they're going to try to find each other in the future lifetime. So that's the premise. And with that premise, the possibilities are endless, because you can reincarnate people all day long. You can create new couples, and you can have things happen to them. And the way the story starts, this picture is actually taken, I don't know if you can see that, taken in the Starch, well, let me pass the book around, taken in the Starch Cemetery over on Highway 311. And the story opens on October 28th, October 24th, 2008. And there's a guy that's about to kill himself. He's despondent. He just doesn't feel that he's worthy anymore, and he's gone out to the cemetery to shoot himself. And while he's sitting there trying to get the nerve to pull the trigger, a girl is driving down the road. She has a flat tire. and she sees his car parked at the cemetery. She looks in her trunk, there's no spare. I mean, you know, go figure, it doesn't have air in it. So she goes and she sees this guy about to shoot himself, and she gets involved. She talks to him, and she realizes that she can stop this guy from shooting himself. And she was just going to get help with the tire, but then she realizes this. Well, as a result of the discussion that they have, they realize that they've known each other. How many of you here have had this experience where you meet someone in your life and you feel like you've had a connection or you've known that person? Can I have a show of hands? How many times you just have a real positive feeling about that person? And then the reverse of that is sometimes you'll meet somebody and you just don't like them. And you don't know why, they haven't done anything to you, but you just don't like them. The people that believe in reincarnation will say, well, that's because you knew them in a previous life. I don't know if that's true or not, and I'm a skeptic. I don't have any evidence, I don't have any proof that reincarnation is a real thing. I don't know. It's fiction. It's a story. What's interesting is the people that are reading the stories are saying it's an intriguing thought. We've had people on the internet discussing this back and forth, volumes of emails, people quoting the Bible and saying it's not scripturally supported or it is, and I didn't realize it was such a big topic. Gallup poll did a study, and they said 25% of Americans believe that reincarnation is a possible thing. Me, I don't know. I had never really thought about it until this whole thing came up. And if you were to ask me right now, do I have any proof? The answer is no. I don't have any proof. It's just an idea that is certainly interesting for fiction. You can certainly run a long ways with it.
It's certainly better than vampires.
It's better than vampires. And I'm glad you said that because Twilight has made millions and millions of dollars in the series of movies, and my feeling is that this is better. This series is better, and so I'm in the process now of talking to a guy in Austin who's in the film business, and we're going to try to put together a package, screenplay, and we're going to try to film some sequences from the film in order to go see the money people, you know, our briefcase and coat and tie and all that, go see the money people and say, hey, we need to make this movie. That's how it starts. And it may take years, I may die first, but I'm coming back.
Will you be
so,
a newspaper?
I'm sorry?
Will you be a newspaper publisher when you come back?
I don't know.
Come back as different things.
I don't know. And interesting, in I Will Find You, there's a character set in the 1890s that's involved in yellow journalism, which, you know, was one thing. People ask me about these books. They say, well, where did you get the characters? You know, are you copying somebody's personality? Is this somebody you know? And the answer is write what you know. I'm a psychologist, I'm a newspaper guy, and so there are characters in here who are psychologists and newspaper guys. Well, obviously, these are the topics that I know. I had fun with the yellow journalism. That was the Spanish-American War, and it was really entertaining because these guys literally made up the war. I mean, it really wasn't much of a skirmish in Cuba, but by Jove, the newspapers, they wanted to sell copies, so they made up headlines, and my character is a headline writer. One of the things that I use to connect the characters from book to book to book is when they would say things like, one of the characters in the opening chapter, her name is Lori, and she's talking to this guy, his name is Wallace, who's about to kill himself, and she says, you know, if you killed yourself, it would be pretty amazing because the headlines would say, shooting in cemetery, 50 dead. And if you think about that, that's pretty funny because there's already 50 people dead in the cemetery. But she does this line like this, okay? And throughout the book, the other characters, you'll catch them doing this thing, okay? So that's a way for me to tell the readers that these guys are all connected. It's those similarity of attitudes and of those kinds of motions. And after I wrote the book, I mean, I just looked this up on the internet a week ago. The reincarnation people, those that believe in reincarnation, think that we do, when you go from life to life, you do maintain characteristics and physical looks. I didn't know they believed that, but they say, you know, sometimes a particular nose or a certain kind of eye will be transferred from one soul to, or well, the same soul, from one life to the next. I didn't know that, but the reincarnationists say, yeah, that's a fact. How do you prove that? I don't know. One of the things that, devices that I put into the book that made it interesting, I think, is the fact that Laurie and Wallace, who are the main characters, realize that they've had past lives. And the question is, how do you make them realize? And this is kind of a time machine series of books, you know, you're bouncing around in time, 1,000 years. How do you transfer that information from place to place? And you remember the old H.G. Wells Time Machine movie, you know, he gets in this device that's built and, you know, does all these things and he moves. How do you do that? Well, as I say on the cover of the first book, I don't even know the line. Flip over the back side. I want to say it right. She's reading the book. What a difference a little kiss made. So the device that's used for them to transfer knowledge from person to person is a kiss. Now that makes this a love story, and it is not a romance book or romance series. It is not. I've never read a romance book. I don't know how they work.
It's always a happy ending.
These books all have happy endings. But that's how they transfer the information, and that's how they realize that they're traveling through time. Another device that you've probably thought about, you know, you're driving down the highway and you make the decision to go this way instead of that way for some reason. You find out later that had you gone that way, there was a huge car wreck and a lot of people were killed. And you say, why did I go that way? And you say, oh, some guardian angel spoke to you. Some little voice said, go this way. Well, in the books, Laurie becomes the guardian angel for other characters in the past. And so they learn that Wallace, being a psychologist, he hypnotizes her and does past life regressions, and she realizes that she can actually go into the past and be the guardian angel for the past existences of herself and of Wallace and change things. So now what you read early in the story is no longer set in concrete. It now becomes changeable. So as you read later in the book and you realize that they have this power to do this, they're able to greatly alter the story. That makes it very entertaining because you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know. You thought it was set in stone. You find out later it's not. And then I finally introduce a pair of characters that they're set in the year 2039, 2040, and we learn they're the guardian angels for Laurie and Wallace. And they're coming back, altering their lives, and in turn going back and altering other lives. So it gets to be a pretty gripping story. The third book is called Missing You, and the fourth book is Everything to Me. All of the books, the covers are my photos. Obviously, you know, being a photographer, I'm not going to let somebody else do my pictures. Anyway, that's where they're at, where the books are finished. We're in the process of trying to get a package together to sell them as a motion picture. And I'm a carpetbagger now. See, I have a little carpet bag over here. And I want to write a scene with a carpetbagger, so maybe there'll have to be a fifth book. But, you know, carpetbaggers, these are guys that, you know, they carry their wares, you know. I've got books here. So let me answer questions. Anything you want to ask about the books or about fiction or about writing or about anything? Yes, sir.
You indicated that we should know the outcome. But you also indicated
that I didn't.
that you become attached to characters, and you were supposed to kill them off, near the end. But you discover as you get there, you can't kill them off because you like them too much.
That's right.
What is happening in your psyche or your soul or your head or something? Use your psychologist self. Tell me, what's happening when this extreme fondness occurs between a real person and an imaginary person?
I can speak to that.
I think it's progressive insanity that leads to a psychosis that requires medication and incarceration. No, that's a good question. We're all creative people. And when you create something, you don't want it to disappear. I don't know how many of you do this. When you write a book or a short story or something, you go back and read it and read it and read it and read it. Now, at some point you get tired. But then you put it down, and a year or two later you read it again. I mean, you already know the story, but you're reading it. And that's because you're fond of what you did. You're fond of your creativity. And that's a good thing. I mean, you don't want to write something and say, well, that's not worth reading, and throw it down. I think it's an interesting question because, for sure, when I finished book one, I thought it was done. And there are some characters that die. That's why in book two, I created the device where they could come back and change that and bring those people back to life. I mean, it's a very powerful position to be in. You know, you're capable of doing anything you want with the characters. Psychologically, maybe it's because we want that power, that control over these things that we've created. And most writers are very sensitive about their work, and that's another thing that I've talked to a lot of writers' groups over the years, and I say you cannot have a thin skin. You have to be able to take criticism. People are going to dislike your work, and they're going to be mean about it. You know, they're going to say, oh, yeah. Well, as a writer, you hate to hear that. I mean, you want to hear what I like hearing with these books. I couldn't put it down, and I'm hearing that. I love to hear that. I couldn't put it down. And number two, it made me cry. I dig that, you know, and this is not cries of sorrow, this is cries of joy. Mike, you said you had an answer to that question.
Yeah, well, and you're the psychologist, I'm not, but my, something that I've often said is that none of us have ever written anything that was not on some level autobiographical. Everything we write is a projection of our experiences and our beliefs and just a composite of who we are. So every one of your characters, even your villains, are to some extent a projection of your own personality. So this is why you don't want to see them die, because it's sort of like seeing part of yourself die. So I think that's one possible answer. Why is it that I don't want to see my characters expire? Because they're part of me. I think that's one possible answer to that question.
And I think that's a good answer. And people have asked me the question, well, you know, how much of your personality is in these characters? And I answered that by saying, well, I wrote a book called The Land of the Nunch back in the 80s, which is about some little people, spacefaring little people that crashed on an island. And the main character was an information gatherer. His job was to create a history for the community. That's a newspaper guy, okay? And in this story, the main character is a psychologist. Okay, so yeah, I guess some of your personality does end up in there, but by the same token, I've had people say, well, I know who that is. You know, no, don't go there, you know, because give me some credit that I can invent things. You know, I'm not necessarily copying down real events.
And you're still the filter through which that information's had to go at the very least.
Right, and then I have this question. I mean, this has been a very freaky experience for me because I wrote, like in 2039, there is a scene where the main character is a PR director for the Denver airport, and she says she's got the airport's about to close because it's snowing, and she's got a bunch of journalists there, and she's talking to them, and they said, we heard you're getting married. And she said, yeah, you know, we're getting married on New Year's Eve, and that's day after tomorrow. and it's going to be a full moon tomorrow. She says this to him, part of the dialogue. I just wrote that when I did it. Now, it was important that it be a full moon tomorrow, because at that point, Wallace does not know that these people are from the future. He knows them, but he thinks they're from the past. And what happens to Wallace is he realizes, if my soul goes on to these people, I have to die. And that's a very uncomfortable position to be in. So the full moon on the day before New Year's Eve, the 30th of December, becomes very important in the story. I just wrote that, okay? After the book was done, I said, I wonder if there's a full moon on December 30th, 2039. So I went to the almanac and I looked it up. I said, wow, there's a full moon on December 30th, 2039. I said, okay, I got lucky. 1 in 30 chance, right? There's a full moon every month, right? Wrong. There's a full moon on December 30th about every 20 years. And I'm looking at this saying, how did I know that?
Where were you 20 years ago?
Don't know. And I start looking at other things in the book that are like that. It's like, I didn't look it up. I didn't know that. I must have heard it somewhere. I didn't know this, and I look it up later and I find out that it's true, that it's factual. I didn't know anything about, there's coal mine scenes. I didn't know anything about mining the coal mines in Pennsylvania in 1670. But people that read this, like this guy that's a historian, when he read it, he said, your detail is amazing. I don't know. Where did,
Research.
I'm sorry?
You didn't research?
No.
Your channel, Doug.
I just, somebody said that to me.
Automatic writing.
So what is that? What is channeling? I didn't know. And this one guy, as a matter of fact, Monday night he said that to me. I said, what are you talking about? What is channeling? And so he told me, well, you know, you're getting it from the spirits. I said, no, I'm a skeptic. I need some evidence here. But where does this come from? How do you write 4 books in a year? I think the best writing I've ever done. And I've written fiction before, but this stuff is above what I typically do.
Though, frankly, I would postulate that a good writer gets better progressively
Yes.
throughout their life. Of course, it's the best writing you've ever done if you're an actual, real good writer, because you've gotten better throughout
Yes.
your life. So, you know, ideally, the 4 you write next year will be even better.
Well, and also you cannot judge your own work. And when you finish your book, you're the biggest fan for a while until you write the next thing. Oh, this is great. You need to read this. So yeah, all those thoughts go through. Yes, ma'am.
Are you ever surprised, because I know you say know how it's going to end and draw it out, and you know, and then you read other writers like Jerry Jenkins, who sits down and just starts typing, and he's published 175 books. So we did NaNoWriMo here, so that was my first effort at fiction, because I write other kinds of things. And I loved it, and I found that something would happen to the character that I didn't know was going to happen. I go, no, you know, but it happened. I mean, it's like.
I think part of that, and I know people write that way. I don't. You know, I kind of need to know where I'm going. But I think what happens is you get to know the character so well that they just do things that are logical in that scene, are logical in the setup that you've provided, and so it just kind of flows. I think the best computer in the world is your brain. You put in the right characters, you put in the right dialogue, you put in the right premise, you let it cook for a while, and you're going to come out with a nice story. The idea for this series of books, and at the beginning it was just an idea for a story, not 4 stories, jingled around in my head for 2 years. You know, I didn't really think I was going to sit down one day and write it, or, you know, 1 week and a half period and write it. So I think the brain is the soup, you know, that cooks. You put all this information in. The premise was good. The premise was wonderful. The idea that maybe there are couples that can go back and forth in time and they can affect each other's lives, and it explains premonitions, it explains dreams, it explains guardian angels, it explains that sense of I've known you before. all these things came together. Well, maybe being a psychologist, that was stuff that was of interest to me over the years, and it finally just came together, I guess.
Yeah. I have a couple I noticed all the books are written, they start out in Canyon Lake.
Yes, isn't that funny?
It's funny in a way, because all right, I haven't read them, but according to you're telling different parts of the story, they go all over the place.
Yes.
And why is the starting point Canyon Lake?
Because that's where it started.
Yeah.
It's right in what you know.
But I mean, in your way of looking at the story, it always comes back here to go off somewhere else?
Yes. Canyon Lake, how do I explain this? How many of you are on YouTube or on internet? Everybody?
Internet, yeah.
Okay, write down my YouTube channel, which is Monkey Doodle Cartel. I figure if you're a cartel, you should say so up front. Monkey like an animal, doodle like doodle bug, Monkey Doodle Cartel.
C-A-R?
C-A-R-T-E-L, like an organization that's created to rip the public off. Monkey Doodle Cartel. I was a joke,
So
but
this is like .com?
no, you go onto YouTube.
Oh,
Okay,
Good.
you go onto YouTube. So go to your browser like Google or something, you type in YouTube. Then once you get YouTube, it'll say search, and you type in Monkey Doodle Cartel.
Is Monkey Doodle one word? Cartel.
3 words. Monkey Doodle Cartel. And these guys are going to bring it up.
Yep.
Yeah, it's amazing. Computers are amazing. So you bring up Monkey Doodle Cartel, and I've got a bunch of videos that I've put up there. And a series of 6 or 7 what I call audio blogs, which is where I'm just talking about writing, talking about this project, talking about filmmaking. There's also a video on there called Hot for Truth, The Cemetery. Hot for Truth, The Cemetery. Now I'm going to warn you up front, it's R-rated. There's some bad words in it. I didn't bleep them out because I thought it was important. What happened is that we had gone to the cemetery, the Starksville Cemetery, in October of 2008 to photograph pictures for a story I had written called A Creep Tale that I was going to run in the newspaper on Halloween. And the story is very simple. It's a legend you hear that sometimes you'll go to cemeteries and you'll see a woman in a wedding dress. Now this is a legend, okay? I don't know if it's true or not. Well, I thought, well, I'll write that story, I'll put it in the paper, and we'll illustrate it. So I went out there with the lady that models for me and put her in a wedding dress. And the story is that this couple gets married. They're leaving the wedding reception. They've had maybe a little bit too much to drink. They're not paying attention. They run off the road and crash into a tree. The husband, who'd only been married, a few hours, is killed. The woman, still in her wedding dress, then gets out of the car and goes into the middle of the street to flag somebody down to get some help. Around the corner comes the best man. He doesn't see her, he runs over her. He sees what he's done and panics and thinks, oh, well, I've killed the bride. And so he drags her off into the woods and digs a shallow grave, puts her in the grave. You're looking at me like, this man's crazy. Puts her in a shallow grave, but the problem is she wasn't dead. So he ends up burying her alive. And that's the reason today in cemeteries around Halloween, late at night, you'll see a woman in a wedding dress grieving for this whole situation. So we decided to go photograph this creep tale, and that involved going to the cemetery. I want to remind you that Comal County Sheriff's Office was called a total of 4 times when we did this. One of the scenes we had to show where the lady was run over by a vehicle and somebody was dragging her off the road. So my daughter played the part of, and she has a sweatshirt on, so you can't tell that she's a girl, but she's supposed to be a guy. So she's dragging the model off the street, and somebody drives by. And they called 911. And we got that audio, which is in that video. We put the audio there so you can hear the actual audio. And the police came out, and what are you doing? Well, when they realized who it was, the police officer recognized me, realized what we were doing, and said, oh, figures. And so, yeah, we didn't get in trouble, and then 3 times that we were at the cemetery, the police came. Now, this is over a period of weeks, because people would drive by, they'd see lights, they don't know what's going on, and the police would be summoned again and again. I mean, it was kind of funny. While we were doing this for the creep tale, my model saw an entity in the cemetery. Okay, I didn't feel anything, I didn't see anything. She did. I had the video camera, so I videotaped the response, and that's what the film on YouTube is all about. Her seeing this person, and you know, okay, I'm a journalist. I'm going to take pictures. I'm going to record what's going on. And during the course of that experience, she told me things that I didn't know about her, that she feels she's an empath, that she has contact with people in another world. And I'm saying, I need proof. I'll listen to you, but I need proof. On October 24th, 2008, was one of these incidents where we had filmed, it's in the film, and we sat down after filming, which was typical, you know, packing up the equipment, you know, here's my video cameras and I got to pack up. So we sat down and started discussing, and she said to me, this is where the premise comes from for the book. She said to me, you know that these people aren't dead. Now understand, we're sitting in the middle of a cemetery in the middle of the night with just battery-operated lights. Okay, they're not dead. Well, where are they? Well, they go on, you know. This is what she said to me.
Your mom?
No, my model.
Oh, your model.
My model. My mom might have said that too, but my mom at the time was not involved.
Okay.
So that's where it came from. And the video is on YouTube. You go look at that and you say, oh, I understand why this is such a powerful story, because it's coming from a very powerful experience. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Doug, I truly appreciate you bringing all this up, because it's
Now you're calling the authorities.
no, because
she
you may call
she
them
may
on
think
me.
of some of this stuff.
But what it is, in '08, I did an art show for my hometown, and it honored many, many teachers. It honored the coach, who coached my brothers and took them to state, etc. But I was going to do the real story about this, but I knew it's just plain and simple. And then it dawned on me, as I look back on this story, that was not a coincidence. I was initially taken there by an aunt who was my friend's aunt, had passed away. And every time I look at each one of the persons that I did paintings of, or etc., there's a story behind it, and there's a connection of a loved one who has passed. I'd love to do this book about those connections and why we were brought together. And that same coach I was telling you about that we honored there died the next month. He was supposed to come so the boys, or the men, could tell him bye. But what I'm having difficulty with, this is a very small, very religious hometown. I am not going to be able to use the name of the town and the people that this occurred. And then how do I show my paintings without involving everybody?
Where the town is, because
Yeah, but the paintings don't
Oh,
really
you're
show
getting
the
to
town,
show
you're not
detail.
drawing the
They don't
sign.
know
Well,
what
they'll
the
give you.
movie house was.
It's 30 miles west of Fort Worth.
Well, are you asking, will they be upset that you do
Oh, I
this?
know they'll be upset, but what I'm saying is, I'm trying,
Well-
I'm usually
Well, they
a
send the devil after
nonfiction
her.
writer. But both of us are trying to lean into fiction because we know the material we have is gonna get us.
It's gonna be
in-
true fiction.
Well,
It's
call
perfect.
it fiction, and don't ever tell the truth about it.
Yeah.
You know, just
What do I say to the folks at why did you put me in there with a different?
well, I've already had that. I mean, I've already had people complain, oh, I know who that is, and I just deny it.
You don't have to
You know.
say anything.
There is one character in this book. there is one character in this book series that I will admit is a real character. It's a real person, and it's the character of Richard Strain. It's based upon a person that I know in New Braunfels. And I got his permission. I said, I like you, I like the, and he and I, by the way, have a connection. When I first met him, it's like, how long have I known you? And we started talking, and we got along really well. And I wrote something, and I asked him, can I use you in this? He's a nurse, and he's been involved in the organ transplant business. And he was involved in the very first pediatric heart transplant in the country, in the world. He was the guy that put it together. And he tells the story, and I put it in the book. He tells the story about how a kid, a boy, and I don't remember his age, it's in the books, it's 11, 12, 13 years old, something like that. The boy is brain dead. And he goes to the mother and he says, my name is, and he gives his name, and the woman says, I know why you're here and I know what you want. And he's freaked out because this has never been done before. This is 30 years ago. And the woman says, I had a dream. God told me. And he said, well, I hope he gave some details because I don't know what I'm doing here. This has not been done before. And so she said, yes, take my son's heart, you know, put it in another person. And he didn't have a recipient. At that time, they didn't have the organ matching programs. It's as a result of that experience that they created the organ matching programs. Because he spent, I forget now, I think he said 27 hours on the telephone calling every hospital he could come up with, looking for somebody that needed a heart. He had a heart, a pediatric heart. Now in the past, prior to that, heart transplants were done from this surgical suite to this surgical suite. Nobody had ever taken a heart out, put it in an ice chest, and flown it miles away and put it in the chest of somebody else. That had not been done. And this guy said, we can do this. He finally found a patient, and the doctor said, no, it's too dangerous, it won't work. No. And he called that doctor all night long, again and again and again, until the doctor said yes. And they grabbed that heart, they took it, they put it in that kid's chest, the recipient's chest, and that kid lived another 10 or 11 years. This was the beginning for this individual of thousands of transplants. He was the go-to guy in the United States of America. He lives in New Braunfels. Now he's kind of semi-retired now. He still works in the organ transplant business, but he's a nurse. But he was teaching surgeons how to do transplants because he was the expert. And he says there's never a more monumental moment than when you put a heart into a patient and you see it beat. He says it's incredible. So I knew these things about him. I wanted to use him in the story. So I said, can I put you in the story? He said, yes, by all means. Just make sure he's handsome and smiles and all that. All right. I did, and then he read the book. And he sent me an email, and he said, literally, he said, Doug, how long have we known each other? And, you know, I said, well, about a year. He said, no, seriously, how long have we known each other? Because you put details in there that I never told you. Details about my personality, about the way I do things, which is totally different than other nurses that are in the same business. How did you know that? So, I don't know. So it gets a little strange. And that's the only person that I'm going to admit is a real person in the book, and that's because I got his permission. That would be what I would suggest to you is get their permission. Now, some will say yes, some will say no, or you just do it without their permission and lie about it. You know, just...
Maybe the relatives.
Well, you know they did that in the house.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Yes,
I have
ma'am.
a copyright question. The book I did, the fiction that I wrote for NaNoWriMo, was based on a cemetery plot that I saw 20 years ago at Pioneer Cemetery in Dallas. And it was very distinct, and it has a name, Annie J., you know, and I described that in this book. Is there a copyright infringement of any sort since that's a real thing?
Nope. There's none at all. I mean,
No.
if you're standing on a public street looking at a thing, you can
Right.
write anything you want about it. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's, and you're not talking about copyright really, you'd be talking about, is there some kind of privacy
Right.
issue?
Well,
and-
I'm a photographer too,
I'd
so
say
I worry
no.
about copyright. I know there's things you can photograph and things you can't without people's permission, so. I just wondered if that was.
Yeah, but people overstate the kinds of permissions that you need. I used to run a history magazine. We'd go out to reenactments, and these reenactors would come up to us and say, well, you know, if you're going to take a picture of us, you have to pay us a modeling fee. I know. If I'm in a state park and you're there in costume, I'll take a picture of you if I want. So there are far fewer restrictions. That's what we have the First Amendment of the Constitution for. You can pretty much, unless you're stealing somebody else's work, do just about anything you want.
I nearly got beat up in Hollywood, California one time. There was a lady on the street and her hair literally went from the top of her head to the ground. And I'd never seen that before. And so I took her picture. And this guy saw me and he demanded money. And I don't know if they were working together or what. And I mean, he was going to break my camera and break me. And so I said, you know what? I can run. And I ran. But no, you have a right. You have a right to take pictures. I was supposed to end at 7. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. There's not that many of us here, and not everyone's going to read. So you're in good shape. This is all what we're here for. So.
And we appreciate it.
Anyway, writing, of course, all of you know this, is the most fun thing you can do in life. You know, it's just you control your characters and you control your story and you can change the world. You can literally cause people to think differently. And I think this series is on the way to doing that. Not that I'm promoting reincarnation, but it is certainly causing discussion. And the discussion I was referring to earlier about the email exchanges was people saying the Bible does not support reincarnation, and other people saying yes it does, and quoting scripture and it does or it doesn't, and then you go researching, find out that the Catholic Church used to say reincarnation was a real phenomenon. And then, and I've forgotten the year, but many hundreds of years ago, there was a guy that was in charge that said, we're not going to talk about that anymore. And he took all the priests that were promoting reincarnation and said, no, that doesn't exist. But that's not reflected in the Bible. And the people that study the Bible will say there are passages, and I can't quote it because I'm not an expert, but there are passages that suggest that there are people in the Bible that come back as somebody else. And that the Bible's not clear as to whether or not our soul goes from place to place to place. Now, obviously the Bible talks about an afterlife, and many religions do. Well, and as I say in the book, if there's an afterlife, could there be a before life? And if that's the case, then we're time tripping. I mean, we're bouncing. And I guess final remark, I mean, do you ever run into people where you say, that person's an old soul? There's just something about them. They're wise. They don't get too excited about the minutiae in life, and they have all the right answers. And you say, boy, they're an old soul. Now, where does that come from? And you also run into people that you think, that person doesn't know anything. You know, they're clueless about what matters in life. And so would they be a young soul? I don't know. Let me introduce you to my editor. She's here. Lori is here, and she says, no. Lori edited all of my books, and she's done a wonderful job finding the commas and the misspellings and all that kind of stuff. And she's really good at it.
I want to know when you have had time to do that with all the other stuff.
I stole the time. I really, when I say 20 hours to write something, it's only because I don't have any more time than that. I stole the time. If you have a story that just begs to be written in your mind, just begs to be written, then you'll find time to do it. And since I write for the newspaper every single week for 15 years, plus all the writing, I mean, my writing goes back to high school. You're faster and faster and faster. Practice makes you better. Any final questions?
Yes.
I hope to go to a couple of conferences this year. Do you have any recommendations on a beginner going to a conference? What do we look for, et cetera?
I don't. And the reason I don't is I have not kept up with that. There was a day I could have answered that, but there's a number of writers groups around. Austin has a pretty good
Yes, I belong to that.
writing community, and you just have to pick and choose. Don't get in the habit of going to seminars and not doing anything. The key is the seminars to give you tips and get you started, but writing comes from sitting at the computer or the typewriter or even longhand and writing. That's where it comes from. And if you get stuck, writer's block, something like that, which I've never had. Now, I don't know if those of you
You
do.
didn't have time to.
I gave a talk some months back on why there's no such thing as writer's block.
Yeah, I don't suffer from it, but some people do. I mean, they'll get to the middle of something, and my answer to writer's block is, well, you're not ready to write. You haven't figured out where the story's going.
Well, my premise was that writing is a technical process, and if you
Yes.
understand the process, then you don't get writer's block. It's not knowing what the next step in the process is that creates writer's block. It's a function of training and experience.
Right, and writing is a tool, as we said before. It's just a tool. So to make your tool sharper, the conferences are good if they'll let you ask questions. I mean, Mike and I were talking about this before. You really get more out of questions than you do out of somebody just telling you things, because you want to know what you're interested in. So try to attend seminars where you know there's going to be a lot of question-answer time.
Like the one you recommended to me, that they were workshops with 3 different themes, and I can tell you learn a lot.
And I think collaborating with others that are writing is really important too, because everybody here shares the same desire to write something that's going to be read and appreciated. I mean, none of us here, I don't think, none of us here want to write something and put it in a drawer and forget about it. We don't really, I mean, you can do that without any help. But what we want is to write something that people are going to read and they're going to say, I like that, it changed me, I laughed, I smiled, I cried, whatever. That's why I like hearing the readers telling me that they cried. I like that. And guys have told me that. I'm saying, yes! and even my editor, she cried. But it took, hey, she had to get to the 3rd book, right? Wasn't it the 3rd book? But I got her finally.
Okay, well, probably, are we going to talk about your carpet bag?
I just have it. If anybody wants to buy these books from me, I have them. They're $10 a piece. And they're expensive because nowadays it costs a lot to do that. So
are you going to stay while we read?
I will stay because I want to hear what you're doing for sure.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, and we're glad you're staying the rest of the session. But you are welcome at all future sessions as well.
Thank you, and I'll attend some. As Jackie points out, I'm just really busy.
Exactly.
But we had the Canyon Lake Writers Guild at Canyon Lake for more than 10 years, and I was the president because nobody else would do it. But it was good for those that participated.
Right.
Now we had people come and go. We had people that came and didn't do anything.
I've heard good things about it. From John Robinson down in Sattler, he used to come to that.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So people have told me about it. So it was sort of like one of our inspirational.
And then what we did at some point, we had an annual conference, and we had it at GVTC because they didn't charge us any money, and we brought in a lunch, and I forgot what people paid, you know, 30, 40 bucks, something like that. And we brought in speakers. We brought an agent in from Dallas. And that's what the money was used for, is to defray expenses of speakers and stuff. And we started getting a pretty good reputation, but it was a lot of work to do one conference a year, but it's worthwhile. And Canyon Lake is well located because you're close to San Antonio and Austin, and people will drive in from those places. So we had that. But thank you very much.
Thank you.